Georgia and Tennessee at the beginning of the year had a lot of hype and a lot of excitement surrounding it. That has kind of died, but this is still a really interesting matchup. I think that there are certain things that Georgia needs to show in order to prove that they can win another national championship. I think there are some questions more than we've seen in teams in the past. And I think that Georgia still has plenty to prove. They feel like they still has a chip on their shoulder. There's a couple guys out that could have a big impact, although they are playing really good football right now. Tennessee, on the other hand, not so much. The loss to Missouri was very disappointing. The fact that they weren't competitive in that game is a concern going into this Georgia game. And I think that they have still a lot to work on. And we kind of knew it was going to be maybe a down year, and some injuries obviously have helped in that regard. But I think that Tennessee still has something to prove in this game. I think that they can show that they are better than what we saw last week. They can show that they can compete with NFL talent. And when you're going against Georgia, it's not going to be easy. When you've seen what Georgia has done this year, at the beginning of the year, I made a video about this. Georgia was beatable at the beginning of the year. And I'm not saying they're unbeatable now, but it is much more difficult now that they have figured out what's wrong with them, how they fix those things, and how to get better. This is a team that I think at the beginning of the year was trying to figure some things out. Carson Beck was trying to get his footing as the starting quarterback. I think the defense had to figure out who was going to be their go-to guys. And now they've lost a couple players due to injury, but it's Georgia. So you just reload and figure it out. But I think the beginning of the year we saw a lot of uncertainty surrounding this program. You saw a lot of guys kind of looking at who was going to make a play, who can you rely on. Carson Beck had to find chemistry with his wide receivers. The rushing attack had to gel with the offensive line. And I think we're seeing more of that come together in the last few games. And you're looking at a team that is still very much a potentially dominant team. And we saw that last week against Ole Miss. Now, granted, Ole Miss wasn't really a top 10 team. I get why they were top 10, but it was just clearly they were not in the same realm as Georgia. And Georgia has shown that even without their best game, they can still stop certain players and certain teams, I should say. Even without certain players, I think having Brock Bowers back is good, but I think that Lad McConkey also makes a big impact there too. I mean, Bowers is just so natural at making plays. And I think that at times he doesn't really put out the biggest numbers, but he's an impact player that definitely knows when to take his shots and when he is capable of making big plays. He knows when the moment is right and he takes the most or makes the most out of it. I think with losing Jumas Johnson, you have to find a linebacker that can step up. And someone who we haven't talked about a ton this year, but he's having a good year is Smell London. Coming in this year, I was high on London. I thought that he could be a really good player for Georgia's defense. And now that Dumas Johnson is out, he has been the one making plays. If you watch his game, extremely athletic, maybe on the lighter side in terms of his frame, but he is someone who can get around in space. He can move quickly and he can make plays. And so far, we've seen him step up with Dumas Johnson out. That's a lot of work for a Tennessee team that needs to kind of find a passing attack. I think the passing attack has really been lacking compared to last year. And we kind of knew that that might be the case. But Joe Milton has really, I think, taken a step back in what we expected. But I also think that we were waiting for him to show that he was the complete package, and we've yet to see that so far. Now, still an explosive offense. They're averaging almost 6.6 yards per play, but it's the rushing attack really that's been carrying them and has been providing some steady play for this team. They've beaten a couple teams that I think were solid wins. The Kentucky win was very impressive. The Texas A&M win, though low scoring, was impressive as well. This defense has done a good job of playing their part as well. But I think that this is still a team's trying to find an identity post Hendon Hooker, post Cedric Tillman, post Jalen Hyatt. We haven't seen a guy that's really stepped up at wide receiver. And Milton obviously hasn't been what we saw from Hooker, but that's not completely unexpected. How you win this game is you almost kind of just take your foot off the brakes. You almost have to against Georgia. You have to throw all the punches. You're playing to win the game. You're not playing to lose by a little. You're playing to win the game. And that, to me, Josh Heupel's system is built for that. Now you have to obviously have a passing attack and throw some things Georgia's way that they haven't seen. You have to try to steal this win. But I don't think it's unrealistic to think that Tennessee can make this interesting. Do I think they can win? I don't, but At the same time, you have to find a way to surprise everyone. You can't just keep doing the same old thing. You have to find a way to hit Georgia in the mouth and hope that they stumble back enough where you can put up some points while they're trying to figure out and trying to recover. The matchups don't really favor Tennessee, although there are some really exciting players. I think that a guy like Tyler Barron could have a huge impact against Georgia. Georgia's offensive tackles will give him a lot of trouble. Amarius Mims is definitely a guy to watch. If Barron and Mims go head to head, definitely keep an eye on that for future matchups or a future in the NFL for both those guys. The quarterbacks really play a big role. We talked about Carson Beck. We talked about Joe Milton. We'll dive more into them in a little bit, but those guys obviously play the biggest roles offensively. The running backs don't get talked about a ton. When you look at Jalen Wright and Jabari Small for Tennessee, and even talking about Thompson too, you look at guys that can run the ball really well. And I think Georgia has stepped up their running game as well this year. Jason Edwards has taken a huge step forward, and the combination of him and Kendall Milton has been really fun to watch. You have that thunder and lightning approach, and they are thriving in that role. I mean, even at times you look at Dejan Edwards throws a power move in there, and Kendall Milton tries to run away from someone. It's been really fun to watch them, and that's really, I think, one thing that's made this offense more balanced is that Georgia's found that rushing attack. The passing attack obviously still needs to play a role, and for Georgia, they've done that. Carson Beck has looked really confident for most of the year. I think lately he's also making a lot of good decisions. He maybe doesn't have the most impressive stats, but he is making smart decisions, put some zip on his throws, and he's making really good choices. And he's completed over 72% of his passes. So he's done a really good job of taking care of the football, making the right reads, and delivering passes when he needs to. Milton has kind of been, I don't want to say all over the place, but it's just been kind of hard to follow at times. And I think also at other times you see the potential, you see what he's capable of doing, and you see why he's so talented. But I think you still have to see someone who can put it all together. And right now, I don't think we have that. When you look at his last 5 games, he hasn't exactly been just dominating anybody. And that's really where this has to change. I think Milton has to play a big role in this game for Tennessee to win it. I think that Georgia is just too good, and Tennessee needs to, like I said, unleash everything they have and then some. And I don't even know if that'll be enough, but you at least have to try.